All right, what's on your mind?
Oh, well, no. I'm thinking that one of the reasons that the logical arguments that we often use is not quite as effective as we would like against theists is because they have just so much invested in their beliefs, and I think until we can make them realize that they can't make an objective assessment of the facts due to their seeing one of the possible outcomes as unlivable. They often say that it's unlivable to live as an atheist, and we won't be able to change their minds.
I think you're right that there's a heavy emotional investment, and that does stand in the way of an unbiased assessment of data. I went through that myself when I deconverted.
People do write in a lot and say, can you help me figure out what will change the mind of this person? And my simplest answer is no.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but people generally go through a progression when they deconvert. I mean, it's not like this sudden road to Damascus experience when it's like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that argument. That changes everything. Usually they, if they go there at all, they have to change their mind in stages. And in many situations, it's not really my business to push on them something that, to say your beliefs are all stupid and you should change right now. I can only argue with them a bit at a time, sort of around the edges of where we have common ground, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that also write in to talk about the extensive fear that they felt when they had trouble believing as children or young people, when they started to not believe. There's a definite theme of fear. And I've even had theists who believe write in to tell me that, aren't you afraid of hell? And I think to myself, they don't understand. They'll say that fear is not key to why they believe, but I know that it is, because you wouldn't try to use fear to manipulate someone else to believe if you didn't feel it was effective in yourself.
Right. Also, I mean, on the nonprofits last week, I think they brought up a letter that we received, one of several letters actually, where somebody was talking about, like, I'm in a relationship with somebody who's a theist, and we really, I think this person's great except for our completely incompatible views. Can I change their minds?
No.
And sorry, probably not. I mean, if you want to stick out the relationship for other reasons, we really have been getting a lot of these kind of emails lately.
Yeah.
If you want to stick out the relationship for other reasons, I have observed that the theist tends to be more likely to drift toward atheism, but I wouldn't count on that, and I don't think that there's any, super skull-penetrating arguments that work on everyone every time.
And you never know when that person is just going to have some weird experience or talk to their family, or something will occur in their life and they just become uber religious. So there's an absolute chance there. But I think you're right. There's a heavy mental and emotional investment that I think is drilled into most of these people when they're very small. And it's hard to undo that. And for the person, it's particularly difficult because in addition to trying to have a discussion with someone like you, for example, they also have to undo a lot of what's been done to their head in themselves. And even becoming aware of that is a chore.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you guys, because that's what I went through. I was a theist and a deist, and then I finally became an atheist. But the thing that made it possible for me was to see that it wasn't so bad. Everyone goes through that gateway of despair, but it's possible to live a positive, productive, meaningful life as an atheist.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until then that I was able to. So I think that one of the main things we should focus on maybe is to try to show them writers like Bertrand Russell and people who can show you that you can have a meaningful life.
Yeah.
And until we do that, I think the logical arguments help, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah, well, I actually like to start out more basic than that. When people write and ask for atheist book recommendations for a theist, I usually don't go with something like the God Delusion. I start with a book that is about scientific reasoning and critical thinking, and just say, forget about the atheism for now, because when you're in the habit of trying to poke at your beliefs and try to figure out the weaknesses in them, that's when you're vulnerable to becoming an atheist. And I think that people have to be led through that stage first.
Yeah.
And if they're a theist, but they still learn critical thinking and scientific reasoning, hey, that's better than when they didn't have it.
And depending on what they believe, I think like Bart Ehrman's Misquoting Jesus, where he's talking specifically about the Bible, that could be of interest to somebody who has like specific devotion to the Bible. If they are interested in that, it's a way of looking at what exactly are the textual criticisms and how does that work and how are these books evaluated and how do we come to conclusions about when they were written and how they were written and whether or not they were altered. Something like that is also a good thing to introduce depending on where the other person is at. If they're at a point where they actually feel like it matters what's true, because a lot of times what's true only translates to what's doctrinally correct. But if they're at a point where truth would matter to them more than their doctrine, something like that could have an impact. But like Russell was saying, there's kind of a continuum where you have different stages in development. There are some people who just have an epiphany and they say, "Oh my gosh, this just isn't real." But some people, it takes some time and different pieces of information for them to finally reach a point where they say, "Oh my gosh, was any of this true?"
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say one more comment, and I'll get off so maybe someone else can get on. Back to what Tracy said, that it's a very fear-based belief. I think that's a part of it, but I think it's more seductive than coercive. It pulls out so many of our core desires and wants and needs to have someone that's always looking out for us, someone that loves us no matter what. I think that's really more. That's what really causes us to hold on to it so fiercely, as opposed to the fear, even though that is a factor. Yeah, well, I just want to say thanks, you guys, for having me on. You guys are doing great work, and I enjoy your show every week.
Thanks.
Thank you
for listening and watching. I think that if people didn't either enjoy what the religion, get a nice feeling from what the religion tells them, or be afraid of what what would happen if they didn't believe the religion, then because we've already pointed out that there's really no good reason behind it, there wouldn't be even those emotional reasons to get involved. So, people have beliefs for a lot of different reasons.
Correct.
But
correct.
But it usually falls into some category of either it's very well demonstrated to be true, or there's a good emotional reason to believe it.